Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Escaping Rock Bottom, the podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Lee. I got a really cool guest with us today because she's also in the broadcasting world. She does talk radio, which is going to be fantastic. She also has a pretty crazy story of her own recovery and some of the things she's battling today as of this very moment, this very hour. So Jennifer is here with us today. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really excited.
It was really cool. We actually met each other. I was speaking at a 12-step recovery meeting up in the Palisades here in Southern California a couple of weeks ago. Shared my experience, strength, and hope. Told the audience, told the people who were in the room that day that I do a podcast. And so Jennifer came up to me and was like, "I got a story for you."
Yeah, well, actually, I trampled down everybody that was in line to shake your hand to say, like, "I got to come on your podcast," because basically you just told my story. You know?
Yeah, it was just it's the way it is in recovery, right? So okay, well, what was it that you related to?
I related to, well, I mean, all of our stories are the same, just in a different way as far as circumstances, but just your struggle since a very young boy, basically, and just the struggle year after year after year, you know? And also with addiction, people think that, I mean, this disease does not discriminate, you know? The privileged boy, you know, upper middle class. Somebody said in a meeting the other day that this is like the only disease, or this is the only place where, like, if you're in a meeting, you'll have the president of the bank, you will have the bank teller, and the bank robber all in the same room hugging it out. You know?
So true, though.
So,
it really is. It really is so true. Take me back to where you were born and raised.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, hence the Queen shirt. Okay, yeah. And at a very young age 11, I realized that there was a hotel, a Marriott, right by my house. So we used to see the tour buses. Okay, so we figured out that if we rode our bicycles, okay, to the Marriott and hung out there all day and caught class at age 11, we can meet all the rock stars. So that's what we did, okay, me and my friends. And then, you know, puberty hit, started growing boobies, and got fake IDs and started hanging out at the Marriott bar to meet the rock stars. Then we got into the tour buses. So that's where my introduction to alcohol and the party lifestyle began, in that Marriott. You know, started at 11 riding bicycles, then we got our driver's license, then the tour buses, then the cocaine and the boys, and it all started with riding my bicycles to the Marriott.
Yeah, it's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Right. But here's the difference. The friends that were riding the bicycles with me, they would partake and go home, and it would be over. Me, it would go on for days and days and days.
Yeah,
so,
that was like me too. I mean, my friends, we'd go out drinking, and last call would be in LA around like 1:30 in the morning, and none of them would know what I would do next. It's like they would all go home because that was last call, but that's when like my real partying began.
Right.
You know, that double life really began.
Yes, and even as a teenage girl, I mean, this is really disgusting, but I mean, I'll get down and dirty things that I would do, like my mother. I would have a wastebasket in my room because I knew I'd be throwing up. I'd be drinking all night, and I'd have to have the wastebasket in my room because I knew, okay, well, I can't let her see me stumbling in the bathroom throwing up, so I have to have this wastebasket in my room.
Yeah.
Because I'll be puking all night. And
I mean, it's like no different than, you know, sometimes it's no different than, you know, the people who stash like bottles of booze, right? And they have a little secret stash in place. Are you just trying to like manage and hide and not... You know, for me, you know, I can say that people always, like, my parents didn't even know I had a drug or drinking problem because I knew that if they ever saw the real depths of like my drugging and drinking, the gig would have been up. So, we just try and hide as much as we can so that people don't call us out and, so, you know, for really what we are.
And, you know, the progression, obviously, at first it's cute. I mean, the thing is, for me, it was never cute. Like from day one, the first time I picked up a drink, you know, there's a scar right here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I got that scar, but it was from the first time I picked up a drink. I drank like a friggin' drunk. I got sick. I got that scar, and I said, "Oh my God, that was great! I can't wait to do it again." You know. And then I discovered, well, if you mix that with a little cocaine, and it was, I don't want to say harmless, but it was cute. You're young. Then I get into radio and all that, and I got into trouble in my 20s. I got on a company cruise. I got caught with a little marijuana, and back then, the companies, we wouldn't expect anything less from our rock jock, and they paid, to bail me out, and then they sent me a card with like rolling papers, way to go, have a nice J, and then later on in my 40s, when something happened and there was an arrest for something, and my face was plastered all over the news in Miami, it wasn't so cute anymore.
Right.
And, I lost my career basically. So that shows the progression of this disease. And I know you have this book, and we talk about the stigma.
Right.
Where people have to understand it was cute when I was in my 20s. Then when I have a son in my 40s, all was like, how could she do this? She has a child and she's working, and the whole, town hated me. Right. And there was this stigma, and they don't look at it as, well, it's an illness. It's a disease. Right. So if I had cancer and I'm in the hospital for cancer, you're not going to say that.
Right.
So
at what point did you find your husband, and eventually we'll get into you, and you do have a teenage son, a young teenage son.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Well, they always talk about no relationships for the first year in recovery.
Right. I did that in my first year. No sex, no relationships.
Okay. Well, very good. That's probably why. I think you said were you a one white chipper?
Yes.
Okay. A one white chipper. That means that
I have yet to relapse.
Okay.
I got sober. I went to my first 12-step meeting after I got released from the hospital. And I have been sober ever since that day, which is 2/22/2010. That was the first time I ever went to a 12-step meeting. I ended up meeting a sponsor 60 days in, and that sponsor looked at me and he goes, okay, no dating, no relationships, and no sex for an entire year.
God bless you.
And it was hard, but I did it.
Okay. So for those of you that are maybe watching this because you think maybe you have a problem, your loved one has a problem, or you're just trying to find out more about recovery, that's the way to success. My story's a little different. I'm a stubborn son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to give up that. Okay. I'm like, you can take my drugs. You can take my alcohol. You're not taking away my boys. You're not taking my boyfriends. All right. So I'm in treatment, and it was like my 30th treatment. All right. I was already like 34. I started my first treatment at 18, and I'm on the druggy buggy. What the druggy buggy is when you're in treatment, they'll put you on this van, and they'll take you to AA meetings. And I'm on the druggy buggy, and I see this guy. I'm like, I want that one. I'm like 5 days sober. That's the one I want. So I pick out this guy. He had maybe 2 weeks. No, he had about 2 years. And he became my husband. So I had no program behind me. I had no sobriety behind me. I had no mental health behind me. I was still sick. And so when you're sick, water seeks its own level. You pick somebody sick. And so we had a very bumpy marriage.
Also not wise. We have this saying in recovery called 13 stepping. And it's when somebody who has a couple of years of recovery goes and picks up on somebody who's got a month, new to the program. We call that 13 stepping, right. And it usually ends in disaster.
Yeah. And
so you essentially got 13 stepped by a man who would eventually become your husband.
Right. He 13 stepped me, and I always look at it as like going to a mental institution to try and find,
right.
your spouse.
I mean, I've been witness. My first sponsor, his wife, they met in the program. They met about 90 days in, and yet he told me, he's like, don't ever do what I did,
Right.
Yeah, it can be dangerous at times.
Yeah, if you just heard that explosion out there, that's what the relationship will turn out as.
Yeah, it's like a dumpster.
Yeah.
As the guy is out there cleaning up the trash.
Right.
Okay, so you end up getting married. You have a son who is now 14 years old.
Yes.
How? Because we should state the longest amount of time you've had in recovery. You got up to 5 years.
Yeah.
and then you relapsed. Why did you relapse after 5 years? Like, what led to that relapse?
I forgot who I was, and I didn't put... So this disease is like getting in the ring with a gorilla, basically. And what they say something about like trying to a gorilla trying to have their way with you and trying to beat off a gorilla. It's enormous. And you have to put your recovery before you put anything else. And anything you put before your recovery, you're going to lose. So slowly but surely, I just started putting everything before recovery. So, I don't really need to go to a meeting tonight. You know what? I'd rather watch The Bachelor because it's a really good episode.
Right.
I want to see who's going to get the rose. I mean, like ridiculous, you know, like, slowly but surely, all things were becoming priorities besides the meetings. Mm-hmm. And then, you know what? My sponsor, I know that she's at dinner, so I don't want to bother her, you know? And, you know, before you know it, I'm like not working my program at all. And before you know it, I'm not even going to a meeting. And my friends are like even telling me, Jen, you need to go to a meeting. You know, I haven't seen you in the meetings. What's up? I know, I'm going to go. And then it's like, when you exercise, if you stop exercising, you're going to lose your muscle tone.
Right.
You're going to get fat. If you stop doing what you're supposed to do to stay sober, what I was doing to get 5 years is I was going to meetings. I was talking to my sponsor. I was staying connected. I had a spiritual connection with God. Mm-hmm. Okay, so my connection was, instead of God, it was going to the shopping mall. It was some guy, you know. It was having relationships. It was everything else besides recovery.
Yeah.
So what do we do? What do we know how to do when we're addicts? We know how to use. That's what comes natural to us if we're not taking our medicine.
Okay, so how long, when you relapsed after 5 years, how long were you out using during that relapse?
So after the 5 years, I mean, once you wake up that devil inside, once you wake up that disease, it's really hard to shut it up. And, you know, putting the pieces together, maybe I'd get like 5 months here, 5 months there. I've never really was able to get any significant time. I was out for probably another 5 years until 3 years ago. And I put together about, I want to say 18 months. 18 months. And it's a constant battle. It still is every single day since that first time I picked up that drink, you know?
How much time do you have at this moment right now?
You really want to know?
Yes.
Well, I just came off a really, really, really bad relapse, and I have 95 days.
95 days as of today. Mm-hmm. And you came out here to California for treatment.
I came out here actually to help my son.
Okay, so, and I want to get into, and not to go, you know, talk too much about your son, but your choices. Well, first off, the father is in detox now, or he's in detox now.
He had 10 years. He
had 10 years. So husband had 10 years relapsed and is struggling now to get back on track.
Yeah, he relapsed about 5 years ago.
So in all of this, you have a son who is now 14 years old, who has clearly been impacted, right, by mom and dad and the drinking and the drugging.
By wolves, basically. I mean, I take responsibility with the relapses, on and off, you know, recovery, not recovery. I was working a lot. I mean, you know, the radio gigs, working, not present.
How has that been for you in your recovery? You know, we talk a lot, we do a lot of step work, and we talk a lot about, you know, what our responsibility is. You know, when we, you know, what our part is in a situation or the downfall of a situation. I have to imagine that there is some degree of guilt or some degree of shame that you're dealing with when you look at your 14-year-old son.
I am in a lot of therapy. Yeah. Okay. I mean, the 12 steps is free therapy, basically. So, you know, working the steps with my sponsor.
But there is nothing like real therapy.
Deep down work. So I'm in a lot of therapy. He's in therapy. Right now, he's here in a
in Southern California.
He's we live in Florida. I brought him here for an adolescent program for behavioral issues. As a result of the way he was raised, I think he might have a little mental issues, mental illness, some bipolar going on, because there's a lot of that in the family. I struggle with depression, and a lot of addicts do. I've had depression since I was 5. When I was in kindergarten, I realized I hated school and that life sucks, And so
now, were your parents addicts, alcoholics?
My father was an alcoholic.
Okay.
He
what
died.
was it like living in that house with an alcoholic?
My father was also a workaholic, so he wasn't around a lot.
Okay.
And I sort of mirrored that because I wasn't around a lot.
A lot of addicts are that. I mean, that's where that saying, the work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
It's a cliche saying, but there is so much truth to that. Like, it's derived from truth that addicts are also some of the hardest workers, but we're also the hardest partiers in our active addiction.
Right.
And we miss out on those really, really important moments of our lives. And, as an addict is, even with kids. And I can say this about my mom. She was never a drunk or a drug addict, but she's bipolar and she definitely has levels of narcissism, but she was the hardest worker I ever saw growing up. But also the thing is she missed so much of our lives.
Right.
And that impacts us, and especially the bipolarness.
Yeah, yes. And in a way I was a workaholic, but I played hard because I was smart enough to create a situation where I got to party a lot in my job. I mean,
kind of comes with the rock and roll side of it. And it's more accepted too, like I always say too, I'm like, when in my active drugging, I would of course surround myself with other people who were doing the same drugs I was, because it normalized the behavior. And if we normalize that behavior, then we don't think that we're doing anything wrong.
Right.
But when we step out of that circle, you step out of that crazy way of life, and suddenly you start to see how crazy and manic that was.
Yeah.
So how
everybody's doing drugs behind the dumpster.
I know. It's
in the hood.
So what's it like? What's it like now? You've got 3 months sober. You have a son who is clearly feeling and reeling from the effects of, having 2 addict parents, but also dealing with his own battles with illness. What do you do? Like, where do you go from here?
Every morning I get on my knees and I have to just be grateful that I made it. I've made it this far, because I certainly should be dead.
Right.
I should be either dead, I should be behind bars. So the first thing I have to do is thank God, because there's an angel. I have 100 angels. I mean, there is a reason why I'm here. So I have to have faith and gratitude. That is one thing that keeps me going, because I know that there's a reason why I'm still here. And I'm going to keep fighting. I fell 3 months ago. I fell down. I effed up. And
let me ask you this, because I have no experience in relapse. I just don't. So I get it that you made it 5 years, you relapse because you just kind of started to follow.
Every single time it's the same thing.
I'll tell you,
every single time it's because I put everything before AA. It's like
the miracles start to happen. Good things start to come into your life.
I think I'm normal, right?
You think you're normal
it's like,
again.
Forget it. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I put everything before, and then I get into a relationship, and I'll make that guy my higher power. I mean, I got very obsessed in a relationship, and it was all about him. It was nothing about my sponsor, nothing about God, and nothing about the meetings. Doesn't take a rocket scientist. And he just happened to have been a rocket scientist. But anyway.
But do you ever look at yourself and be like, I don't get why I keep doing this?
Well, I keep doing it because that's what I know how to do. Yeah. I'm an addict. And if I don't, it's a daily reprieve. And if I don't do that daily reprieve every friggin' morning, then I'm going to use. Because that's what I've been doing. Since I was 5 years old. Maybe I wasn't drinking, but when I was 5 years old, I was eating, or I was, I was doing something in some way. I was always an addict. I always felt inadequate. I was buying toys. Mommy, let's go to the toy store. And I was spoiled, and that was how I got my hit. So if I don't do that daily reprieve every single day, I'm going to use. It's simple.
Do you have fear?
Yes. I have fear. Of course I do. That's why every single day I have to write the gratitude list and I have to talk to God. And yeah, I have fear. Yeah, my disease scares the shit out of me. This disease is really scary. I've had a lot of bad shit happen to me. A lot. I mean, like I said, I should be dead. I've done some bad things.
So when you look at when your son could be, you said your son's likely going to go home with you back to Florida.
Yes.
When you guys both leave here, what's your biggest, fear for him? And, like living with you in the same environment, coming off of a relapse.
That I relapse again, of course. I think the best thing for him would be to go to some sort of therapeutic boarding school. I think that that's the road that I'm probably going to go, and that's what we're trying to do. Convincing him of that is a different story, but, he's getting his help right now. So we'll see, Again, I just have to be spiritual, and I have to pray to God about it and just have faith, That's what I got to do. I can't let the fear take over.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it.
I've spoken to quite a few parents, drug addict parents who are in recovery, and they feel that some of the challenges that they've had raising their children is that they feel that they have let them down so much that it's been hard for them to then be the disciplinarian because they harbor so much guilt because of the crap that they did.
You know what? And that's interesting that you say that because where my son is right now in the program, that's one of the main things that we talk about in therapy with the counselor is how my son was basically, neglected, spoiled, rotten. Here's your, top of the line computer and all your games and all that. I'm going to go over here.
Yep.
So all that was out of guilt, guilt of all of my stuff. And yes, we do that out of guilt because we weren't there for our kids. And so we spoil them with things like that. And it all gets itself worked out in therapy. You have to have therapy. We're in therapy right now. He's in his program and we are talking openly about that. Boundaries.
Has he ever expressed to you anger?
Yeah, well, we're in therapy and we talk about it. Yeah, it comes out sideways sometimes, but we're
is he mad that mom is an addict who keeps relapsing?
No, I mean he's talked about it, that he understands the disease concept of it. And I mean, he's an old soul. I mean, he really has never. Once in a while, he'll be like, "Well, you're a drug addict," or it's not my problem that you're a drug addict. He'll say that, but he's also, conveyed that he understands that it is a disease. I mean, he's been taught at a very young age about what addiction is. I mean, he's a pretty smart young man.
So you've seen the gifts of recovery. Talk about when you hit those 5 years or when you're really in recovery, what is life like for you?
It's a lot. It's a whole different life. It may not be as, living on the edge, crazy, so I like excitement, but the excitement of using is scary excitement. This is more of when I had my 5 years, I didn't have to worry about going to jail or hurting people that I love. I don't want to use the word boring because it wasn't boring. It was just more predictable, let's just say. It was more predictable. It was actually very beautiful. I had meaningful relationships. It was a lot more, it was just real. I remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
I had real friends. And I'm building that back now. I was able to hold down a job, It's dealing with life on life's terms and just facing life, and being a grown-up instead of running away, It's completely different. It's just growing up. I was a grown-up.
Yeah.
I did my dishes. I did the laundry, I did work a lot. I did. I mean, I've always, even when I had my 5 years, the thing with addicts is a lot of times we will switch our addictions. It's like that game. What's the game that we, whack-a-mole?
Yeah.
So I put down the drugs and the alcohol, but then, I became addicted to my work.
Right.
So I, never 100% got it, but I don't think we're always a work in progress.
We are always a work in progress. It's interesting because, I'm coming up on nearly a decade in recovery. Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. But, there have been times in my recovery where I felt dips.
Yeah.
Where I felt not so enthusiastic about hitting those 12-step meetings all the time, where I've kind of felt...
White knuckling it a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, just bored, bored. But here's the one thing that I've learned by talking to people who have relapsed, that's why I always ask. It's not to figure out, what the hell did you do wrong? And
right.
The reason why I ask people who've relapsed, like, what was it like before you relapsed and what were some of the signs, is because I want to be aware of them. I want to learn from you. I want to learn from people who've been in and out, and that's why I always say I'm always so proud of people who do relapse and they come back. That, to me, is not a sign of weakness. To me, and I know society can look at that as somebody who relapses as a sign of weakness. I see it as those who've relapsed and come back. It is such a sign of strength. And what it's caused me is I've vocalized it. So I've shared with my sponsor. I've shared with other people in the room, like, I'm a little bored with AA right now. Or like, I'm bored with this 12-step meeting. And I need to figure out why I feel that way and what's going on. But what I did is I said, to my therapist, I said, I'm a little bored going to the 12-step meetings. And you know what she said to me? She goes, okay, then why don't you come to more therapy? Okay. And I'm like, okay, that's a good trade-off. So I up my therapy sessions, And I just think that by vocalizing
telling on your disease, I call it, is very important.
It's so important, rather than being in this mindset.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to a meeting today, but I also don't want to tell anybody that I don't want to go to a meeting today. So I'll just keep it my little secret, rather than just vocalizing with my sponsor. And we've had conversations. Well, why do you feel that the 12-step meetings aren't working for you as much as they did in year 2 or 3?
Yeah.
And so what we did is we started really rephrasing it. Okay, well, how can I use the program to work in a different... like drugs and alcohol. Girl, let me tell you this. I ain't got no urge. I have zero urge to drink or drug. And so I don't use the program in that way anymore.
Right.
I use it in different aspects, like financial sobriety, or... I just try to use the program now and tackle different issues that I'm going on. And, now it's, where's my next job going to be? That next professional career going to be? And, using my program to help find balance in those other ways.
Right. And, I will tell you, for me also with the 5 years, and when I would get bored with the program, what always kicked up my excitement for life and my lust for life and my lust for sobriety was helping another woman, another alcoholic. I mean... I
love it.
Yeah, going to the prisons.
Yeah,
I loved H&R. I love doing that. I can't wait to get.
See, I'm there with you. That is exciting to me. That isn't the boredom that I experienced with actually just going to a room and listening, because I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I've listened now to you complain about the same thing for the last 5 months. But when I get the chance, when I spoke the other night in Palisades, I picked up 3 sponsees that night.
Yeah.
Like 3 dudes came up to me. They're like, I need you as my sponsor. And I'm like, you got it, buddy. So now every week we're meeting at the coffee shops and we go out to the beach and we do 4th and 5th step work. And I love that.
There's something so magical about it. And
to see that growth in somebody else, so young into their recovery.
I mean, they say you can't keep it if you don't give it away. I mean, some of these slogans are so annoying, and you hear them so long, for so many years. But there's something.
There's truth to them.
It. I mean, that was with the, after the 5 years, it was like that was another thing. I stopped my H&R commitment. I mean, I went to that prison every week, and they were listening to me on the radio, and they Jennifer Wild, oh my God, and you're coming into the prison, and it got me so high. I would leave there. I really
totally.
felt
we get that
high.
rush.
Yeah.
We feel that endorphin high.
Yeah, you can't keep it if you don't give it away.
Yeah.
So
And it's so true. But I mean, that's a lesson that people who are not addicts can even learn from this, is that no, just doing service work for others, take you out of self, makes you feel good about the person you are. And people always, and as we begin to wrap up, people always ask me like, Brandon, how do you know what God's will is for you? In the program or not in the program, people in this world are constantly asking themselves, like, I wonder, what is God's will for me? And I tell people all the time, stop thinking about it. Just get out of self, do for others, and it will be shown to you.
Yeah.
Like it'll be revealed. Take yourself out of yourself, do something for somebody else. That's how you find out what God's will is for you.
Yeah.
You know, like I know, like people ask me all the time, and I tell people, no, my passion is news. I love it. I love talk radio. I love news. My passion in life, it is news. I love telling people stories. It's why I do this podcast. I love sharing people's stories. But my purpose in life is to save other addicts by talking about my recovery, by talking about my struggles, to give them hope that they don't kill themselves, whether it be through suicide or drugs or alcoholism, is simply as my purpose in life is to show you how I got sober so you can save your own life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's amazing purpose. And, you know, your story was so compelling. I got to tell you that there's some guy friends that were so mad at me because I blocked them. I don't want to be dirty, but I cock blocked them. They're like, we wanted to talk to him and we wanted him to, you know, we wanted him to be our sponsor because you do have an amazing message. And yes, that is the key to life is love and helping others. And I think that if somebody is struggling out there with, you know, maybe being in a slump with their sobriety or you know, whatever, just go help somebody. Or even if you're not an addict and you're in depression or having a problem with life,
get out and
help somebody.
Yeah, I love that. When you're in a slump or when you're feeling down or when you're feeling depressed or you're feeling like a dip in whatever it is in your life, get out of self and go help somebody. I'm telling you, it's like a reboot and a recharge. Yeah. That'll just change your way of thinking.
Yeah.
Well, make me this promise, because I know that the viewers and listeners are going to ask us when you hit a year.
All right.
We'll do another podcast.
All right. You got it.
We'll make that promise.
Okay.
And we'll do it over the phone. We'll do it somehow, some way.
No, if I'm back in Florida, I'll fly my butt right back here.
Okay,
just an
good.
excuse to come.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you at home for watching and listening to Escaping Rock Bottom. We'll see you back here next week.
Get the book.
Yes. Mascara Boy. Anywhere where books are sold.